black SUV stopped on gravel at 8:47. Linnea Vance stepped out at the Iowa Agricultural Suppliers Summit. A John Deere 4020, 1978, paint faded to dried sage, rolled into the slot beside her. Flannel shirt, sleeves rolled, a Pioneer seat cap worn soft at the brim. Linnea turned to her assistant, loud enough for the tractor to hear. "Tell whoever's parking that museum piece they're at the wrong event." The man cut the engine, climbed down, touched the brim of his cap to her, and walked through the keynote speaker entrance. The door swung shut. If a story about someone underestimating the wrong stranger is worth your time, hit subscribe and stay with it. Inside the conference hall, Linnea found her seat in the front row. The chair was cold under her hand. Around her, the room kept moving, producers shaking hands, regional buyers comparing notes, a kid from Iowa State refilling coffee at the back. She did not move at all. At 9:30, the master of ceremonies stepped to the podium and tapped the microphone twice. "Our keynote this morning needs no introduction in this room. Chairman of Hollis Agricultural Cooperative, 47 member farms across 3 states, supplier to 23 of the top 50 grocery chains in the Midwest. Please welcome Mr. Garrett Hollis." Garrett walked from the side of the stage in the same flannel shirt and the same soft cap. He had not changed. He did not bring slides. He spoke for 8 minutes about the drought of 2022, about a member family in Pottawatomie County who lost their corn but kept their dairy herd alive by trucking water in from a neighbor's pond for 41 days, about how the cooperative had restructured its payment schedule to keep that family solvent through the winter. He did not mention Vance Foods, though Vance was his largest customer. He did not raise his voice. When he finished, he nodded once, said thank you, and walked off the way he had come. The room applauded. Linnea did not. Her assistant leaned in close. "He supplies 64% of our raw produce intake, ma'am. Exclusive contract through 2033. Linnea did not answer. During the networking reception, she walked the length of the buffet without seeing the food. At the table marked G. Hollis, the name placard still in place. His chair pushed back at an angle. As if he might return, she set down one of her business cards. On the back she had written 4 words in pen. Coffee, -L, .V. And below that, her cell. He did not return to that table. At 5:15 she walked back to the parking lot. The tractor was gone. The slot was empty. In the center of the empty slot, pinned under a small flat stone, were 2 cards. The first was hers, the card she had left on his table. Untouched, no marks, not folded, not creased, just returned. The second card was thicker, craft brown, printed on one side only. Hollis Agricultural Cooperative, Bellwether Farm, 4421 Cedar Falls Road, Cedar Falls, Iowa. We take calls between 6 and 8. No phone number, no name, no closing line. Linnea stood in the empty slot for a long time. The sun was at the angle that turned the asphalt orange. She understood both gestures perfectly. The first card said, "I received what you sent, and I am not changing it." The second card said, "But if you want to talk, here is where I am." She put both cards in the front pocket of her bag, not the inside compartment with the other contacts. On the flight back to Chicago that evening, she sat in the window seat. She did not open her laptop. She put the 2 cards side by side on the seat tray and looked at them for the duration of the descent. The man across the aisle assumed she was reading her own card and looked away politely. She was not reading. She was thinking about how long it had been since anyone had given her a message she had to translate. By 7 the next morning, she was at her desk in Chicago, 2 floors above the city, the lake the color of slate. She did not call legal. She did not call Marcus Thorne. She called her chief financial officer directly and asked for everything they had on Hollis Agricultural Cooperative origin, ownership, contracts, history. By the end of business that day, the CFO walked the file into her office in person. "Off the record for now," he said, and set it on her desk. Linnea opened it after he closed the door. Garrett Hollis, 41. Wharton MBA, 2009. Mergers and acquisitions at Cargill from 2009 through 2017. Returned to Cedar Falls the year his father, Walter Hollis, died of pancreatic cancer. Within 12 months, he had consolidated 47 family farms across Iowa, Nebraska, and southern Minnesota into a cooperative with combined annual revenue of $140 million. He held 71% of the cooperative through a family trust managed by 5 trustees. He did not draw a salary as chairman. The exclusive supply contract between Vance Foods and Heck had been signed in June of 2018 by Charles Vance, her father, personally. Hand witnessed at signing, Linnea read the page twice and sat back in her chair. In February of 2023, Garrett's wife, Maren Hollis, 36, had been killed on Interstate 380 by a drunk driver at 2:14 in the morning. She had been returning from a Waterloo school board meeting. Their son Wyatt was 4. After her death, Garrett had stepped back from public-facing operations. He still held controlling interest. He still attended board meetings. He simply stopped attending conferences, stopped giving interviews, stopped flying. He went back to working the fields with his foreman. Her father had died of a heart attack the same month, February of 2023. 11 days apart, Charles had never mentioned Garrett to her, not once in 3 years of transition meetings, not in any of the binders, not in his will. She closed the file and looked at the lake. On Friday morning, she flew United Express into Cedar Rapids, rented a Ford Escape at the counter, and drove the 47 minutes to Cedar Falls. She wore flat shoes. She had chosen them at home before she left, not in the rental car. She turned onto Cedar Falls Road at 4:50 in the afternoon. The maples on either side of the lane had just begun to turn. The sun came in low and orange over the harvested corn. Bellwether Farm was a white 2-story farmhouse, a red barn, 2 grain silos, and a long machine shed with the door open. Garrett was inside the shed in the same flannel, his forearms streaked black, working a wrench on the carburetor of the John Deere. A boy of about 8 sat on an overturned wooden crate beside him, holding a tray of socket attachments. The boy looked up when her tires crunched. Garrett did not. She sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before she opened the door. She walked across the gravel, stopped 6 paces from the shed. Garrett finished torquing the bolt before he raised his head. "Mr. Hollis, ma'am, I'd like to understand what I'm buying." She paused. "I probably should have asked 20 years ago, when my father started buying it." Garrett wiped his hands on a shop rag. He looked at the boy. "Wyatt, this is Miss Vance. She runs the company that buys our beans." Wyatt looked at her, nodded once like a grown man, and returned to organizing the sockets. Garrett gestured at the house with the rag. "Come on in. There's a clean inn in town, Cedar Inn on Main. I'd recommend it for tonight. Come back tomorrow if you want the tour. We start at 6. Inside the kitchen, he poured her a glass of water from a pitcher in the refrigerator. Above the stone fireplace, there was a single-framed photograph. A woman in her mid-30s, standing beside the same tractor, hand on the fender, summer light behind her. Linnea looked at the photograph. She did not ask. Garrett did not cover it. When she left, the sky over the field was the color of wet copper. She was back at the gate at 6:30 in the morning, Cedar Inn coffee and 2 paper cups. Garrett had been in the field since 5:45. Hank Larkin met her at the machine shed. Hank was 67, lean, with the kind of forearms that came from a life of pulling things tight. He did not shake her hand. He nodded once and tipped his head toward the shed. He said, "To show you what you came to see." He gave her the tour without selling anything. 1,200 acres on drip irrigation. The 6-story grain silo with the cleaning floor that had been Walter's design. The trustee office in what used to be the milk house. The map of 47 member farms pinned to the back wall with red thumbtacks for active, blue for in transition, 2 gold stars for the farms that had been with Walter since 1973. She asked technical questions. Hank answered technical questions. There was no warmth and no chill. They were doing business, and the business was honest. At noon, they ate ham sandwiches on the porch. Garrett came in from the field. Wyatt sat at the kitchen table doing his arithmetic homework. No one had told him to. He simply sat down at 12:15 on a Saturday and opened the workbook. In the afternoon, Garrett walked her out to the last bean field. They stopped at the fence line. She had come prepared with the wrong question, but she asked the right one anyway. "Your wife?" Garrett did not look away. "Drunk driver, I-380, 2:14 in the morning. She was coming back from a Waterloo school board meeting. Wyatt was 4. My father died the same month." Garrett turned his head and looked at her. The first time, all day, that he had really looked at her. "I know," he said. "I sent flowers. You probably never saw the card." She had not. They stood at the fence a while longer. Across the field a hawk was riding a thermal. Neither of them said anything else. At 5 he let Wyatt take her out on the tractor for the closing down run. She stood on the rear hitch and held the steel bar with both hands. The bean stubble whispered against the tires. She did not smile. When she climbed down, she did not exhale in relief either. She had been watching the boy's hands on the wheel. At 7:40 her phone buzzed on the porch table. "Marcus Thorne, need you back Monday morning. Board prep. Supplier audit issue with HAC. Numbers don't add up. We may need to terminate." She read the message twice. The text did not ask where she was. Marcus did not know. But an audit issue surfacing the same week she had quietly pulled an HAC file was not coincidence. Garrett stood in the doorway behind her. He had not looked at the phone. He did not ask. "I'll be back tomorrow night," she said, still facing the field. "All right." Sunday morning she pulled out of the gate at 7. Wyatt waved from the upstairs window in his pajamas. Garrett, on the front step with a coffee mug, touched the brim of his cap. Same gesture as the parking lot. She did not know yet what to do with it. Monday morning, 9 sharp. The boardroom of Vance Foods on the 38th floor. Marcus Thorne sat at the head of the table in a charcoal suit. He distributed an 80-page audit binder to the 7 directors and Linnea. The cover read, "Hack Exclusivity Review Material Breach Analysis." For 22 minutes, Marcus laid out his case. 4 million pounds of corn allegedly short-shipped in the 2026 contract year. 3 signed receiving slips with the discrepancies circled in yellow. An internal reconciliation spreadsheet. A series of emails between the receiving manager and the warehouse logging team. His recommendation: invoke Clause 14, B, material breach, terminate the 15-year exclusive, open an emergency RFP. The 4 bidders he had already pre-qualified included Northwind LLC, registered in Reno, Nevada. Smaller, more diversified, better risk profile. The other directors nodded. Marcus had been at Vance for 9 years, hired by the board when Charles was still chairman. He was the kind of executive who finished his sentences with numbers. Linnea let him finish. "I appreciate the work, Marcus. I'm not voting on the termination of a 15-year exclusive in one meeting. I want independent verification. Outside firm. Pinnacle Forensic Accounting. 2 weeks. Marcus's jaw moved once. 2 weeks is a lot of exposure if Hack is in breach. Then, exposure is what we have. The vote on the motion was deferred. The meeting ended at 10:50. Marcus walked out first. Linnea stayed in the boardroom another 10 minutes, looking at nothing in particular. That afternoon, she called Pinnacle from a phone in her father's old office, which was still technically hers but which she rarely used. She bypassed the legal department. She bypassed Marcus's preferred outside counsel. She used a number written in pencil inside the back cover of Charles's old desk planner, Reed Calderon, who had been Charles's personal attorney for 31 years and now ran a 4-person firm in the Loop. Reed remembered her birthday. Reed did not return calls for Marcus. "I need Pinnacle on a forensic of our Hack reconciliations. Quiet. Direct to me. 4 days if they can." Reed did not ask what was wrong. "I'll have someone there tonight." That evening, at 8:15, Linnea called Garrett from her apartment. She stood at the window looking at the river. He picked up on the second ring. She heard a dish go into a sink. Wyatt was already in bed. "Garrett. Linnea, I need to ask you one question. Did you short us 4 million pounds of corn last year?" The pause was 4 seconds. Not surprise. Calculation. "No. Every grain is accounted for. I'll send you the trustee ledger, the elevator wait tickets, and the original bills of lading in 12 minutes. Open them somewhere Marcus can't see your screen." "Why, Marcus? Open the files first." She opened them 11 minutes later in her bedroom with the door closed. The reconciliation was perfect. Every pound, every loading date, every signature. She did not call him back that night. She did not have words ready that she was willing to use. She put the laptop on the floor beside the bed and lay on her back and looked at the ceiling for a long time. In the dark, she thought about how her father had built a company on the assumption that a man who said yes meant yes. She had inherited the company. She had not, until that week, inherited the assumption. For 4 days, Pinnacle worked. The CFO, brought into the loop on day 2, ran a parallel internal audit. Marcus watched Linnea for changes in her routine. There were none. She showed up on time, signed what she signed, took the calls she took. She had decided not to trust Marcus before she had decided what to do about him, and that order made the acting easier. On Saturday morning, she flew to Cedar Falls again. She did not give Garrett notice from Chicago. She called him from the plane. "I need to see your books, all of them, off your network. They'll be ready when you get here." She arrived at Bellwether Farm at 11:30. Garrett had cleared the kitchen table. He had 3 paper ledgers open and an air-gapped laptop. Wyatt was bowling in Waterloo with Hank. Garrett had arranged it. They worked side by side for 6 hours. Hack shipped versus Vance received. They reconciled by hand, line by line. The discrepancy was exactly £4 million, exactly the number Marcus had claimed was missing. But the £4 million were not missing. They were diverted. 2 signatures on the bills of lading where one should have been. The first was Vance Foods receiving initialed by Marcus's logistics manager, who reported to Marcus. The second was a third-party signature taken right at the HAC loading dock. The name on the second signature, in block letters, D. Park, Northwind LLC, Reno NV. Garrett opened a folder he had been keeping for 18 months. Invoices, wire transfer notifications, shipping manifests. 14 photographs taken at night from a hayloft window, time-stamped. Northwind trucks at the HAC dock in August 2024, November 2024, February 2025, May 2025. "They're buying my surplus at 22% below spot," Garrett said. "Reselling to your company at 11% above. The spread goes somewhere." I reported it to Vance twice. Both reports went to Marcus's inbox. Neither came out. Linnea set her coffee cup down. She did not cry. Her hand stayed on the cup longer than it needed to. At 6, the sun was gone. They were not done. Garrett did not ask if she wanted to stay. He said, "There's a guest room at the bottom of the stairs. Clean sheets. Door locks from the inside. Wyatt's room is upstairs. He'll be back at 9 with Hank." She looked at him for a long moment and nodded once. She did not call the Cedar Inn to cancel her reservation. She let the room sit empty all night. It was a decision, not a circumstance. In the downstairs guest room, she did not sleep until 1. On the small bedside table, there was an old paperback, Wendell Berry, The Unsettling of America. The bookmark was a Cedar Falls cinema ticket stub from 2019. She did not open the book. She looked at the ticket stub for a while. She thought about whose ticket it had been. Down the hall, Wyatt came in at 9 with Hank, took off his shoes at the door, climbed the stairs without being told, and was asleep by 9:20. The house settled around all of them, the way old houses do, the wood remembering its own weight. She was in the machine shed at 6:40 with a coffee. Hank was already there. It was not coincidence. Garrett was in the kitchen making eggs with Wyatt. Hank set a small cedar box on the workbench. The corner of the lid was chipped. The wood had gone the color of old honey. "Your father's box," he said. She opened it. 11 Northwind invoices, paper originals, collected over the past 5 years. Wire transfer confirmations from the receiving side. 14 night photographs, dated. The timestamps burned into the corners by a cheap digital camera. Shipping manifests cross-matched in pencil with HAC's own. And a sealed envelope. Heavy cream paper. Wax seal in red. Pressed with the letters C, period, V, period. The outside read, in her father's hand, "Linnea. When she finds her way here, Dad." Hank waited until she had looked at all of it. "Your father called me in March of 2022. Drove out himself. Didn't bring the lawyer. He'd seen patterns he couldn't explain inside the company. He couldn't move on it from inside. Marcus had bored allies, and Charles was already tired. His heart was already going. He asked me to keep collecting from this side. He didn't make me sign anything. He shook my hand. He said, 'Don't speak unless Linnea comes to Hack and asks something only an honest man could answer truthfully.' He said when she asks the right question of the right person, she'll be ready to hear the rest. He wrote that envelope here at this bench and gave it to me. He died 11 months later. I've been holding it for 5.5 years. He looked at her steadily. Yesterday you asked Garrett if he stole from you. He could have answered any number of ways. He sent you the proof. That was the question. You were the person. The envelope is yours. Linnea broke the seal with her thumbnail. 3 pages, ruled paper. Her father's handwriting larger than it had been in his last years. He apologized for not telling her sooner. He explained why he had trusted Garrett. They had met at a conference in 2017. Garrett had just lost his own father that winter, and had still kept his word about a verbal agreement on the cooperative. Charles wrote that he was old enough to recognize when a man was building something he intended to outlive him. He wrote about Marcus, briefly, without bitterness. He wrote about Linnea, longer, without sentiment. He ended, "If you're reading this, you got to the truth on your own. That's the only way it would have stuck. Don't be too hard on Marcus when you find what he's done. He's small. The 47 families are not. Take care of them first. Dodd." She read it twice. She did not cry. Her hands shook enough that Hank steadied her cup. Garrett walked to the open shed door, saw the box and the letter, stopped on the threshold. He did not come in. He sat down on the doorsill and waited. After a long time, she looked up at him. She nodded, very small. He nodded back, the same size. At 8 that evening, she sat in the farmhouse kitchen with a landline she had not used in 15 years. She called Reed Calderon at his home. "Reed, don't put me on the office calendar. Don't tell anyone I called. I'll be at my apartment Tuesday morning. Bring Pinnacle and bring whoever you trust at the bureau." Reed did not ask why. Tuesday through Friday, Reed Calderon worked with Pinnacle Forensic and a small team at the FBI Chicago field office. The case agent was Special Agent Diane Voss, Financial Crimes Division. 16 years in, subpoenas went out under seal. Northwind's 3 accounts were traced through Cayman, Delaware, and finally to a personal LLC in Nevada in the name of Marcus Thorne's wife, with Marcus's brother-in-law Daniel Park as a signatory. Marcus went to work every day. He attended his 11 o'clock stand-up. He sent emails about Q3 projections. He did not know. The following Monday at 9 in the morning, Linnea called an emergency board meeting. Marcus took the seat at the head of the table he always took. He had prepared a revised motion to terminate Hack, with a cleaner timeline and a stronger Northwind transition plan. Garrett was 4 floors below in a conference room at Reed Calderon's firm, waiting for a single text. Marcus spoke for 22 minutes. He moved the vote. Linnea stood. "Before we vote, I'd like to add evidence." She turned on the wall screen. 87 pages of Pinnacle forensic findings, signed and dated Friday. HAC's clean ledger. Vance's internal ledger. The 14 photographs with timestamps. Wire traces through 3 jurisdictions. The Nevada LLC registration. The personal accounts. She read the number out loud. $28,400,000. Over 36 months. Diverted through a shell company, registered in the name of your wife, Marcus, with your brother-in-law's signature on the loading dock receipts. Marcus's face went the color of paper. "These are forgeries," he said. "Hollis has motive. He's been after exclusivity premium for years." Linnea typed 1 word into her phone. "Now." The door opened. Garrett walked in. No suit. A clean gray flannel shirt, sleeves down. No cap. He carried a thin folder. He did not look at Marcus. He set the folder on the table in front of the chairman of the board, Margaret Ellis, who had hired Marcus 9 years ago. That folder contains a certified copy of a letter Charles Vance wrote in March of 2022. It contains the originals of the Northwind invoices my foreman has been keeping for over 5 years. It contains the dated night photographs my foreman took himself. Your former chairman was a friend of mine. He asked us to wait until his daughter could see this on her own. We waited. He sat down in the empty chair at the back wall. He did not speak again. Margaret Ellis opened the folder. She read the first page. She read the second. She set it down. Marcus stood up to leave. Outside the boardroom door, in the elevator vestibule, Reed Calderon was standing with Special Agent Voss and 2 other agents and a federal magistrate's warrant. Marcus was detained on the 38th floor. No cuffs in the lobby. His charcoal suit jacket was returned to him later by a paralegal. The board voted 8-0 to suspend Marcus and authorize Linnea to manage the cleanup. Margaret Ellis put both hands flat on the table and cried for 90 seconds without sound. At 11:15, Linnea walked out into the hallway and leaned her back against the glass wall over Chicago. Garrett followed her out, and stopped 2 paces away with his hands in his pockets. She asked the wall, not him. Why didn't my father tell me he was scared? He didn't want fear to be your inheritance. He wanted the company to be. She turned around. Looked at him the way you look at someone when you've decided to stop pretending you don't. Stay in town tonight. There's a flight back at 6 tomorrow, he said. I'll be on it. 2 weeks later, the SEC filing was public. Marcus Thorne had been placed on indefinite leave. The federal indictment came down on a Thursday: wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, bail $2 million, no travel outside Illinois. His wife was interviewed separately by the Department of Justice. Northwind's assets were frozen. Vance Foods made no further comment. Linnea declined every interview request. The stock dipped 4% on the news and was back to even within 9 trading days. She flew to Cedar Falls on Friday afternoon. Not on a contract day, not on business. She drove out from Cedar Rapids by herself. Garrett was repairing the west fence line of the last bean field. Wyatt ran out to her car first, carrying a paper cup of fresh lemonade, too much sugar, Hank's recipe, made that morning. He handed her the cup. He looked up at her. "Hello, Miss Linnea." He waited. She did not correct him. Neither did Garrett, who had finished a fence post and was watching from 20 feet away. Wyatt tried again, quieter. "Hello, Lynn." Garrett did not move. Wyatt nodded to himself. "Lynn." And he ran off to look for the neighbor's cat under the porch. Linnea sat on the porch step for 3 hours, doing nothing at all. Garrett finished the fence line and sat down beside her at a distance that was polite but not careful. The wind shifted west and pulled the yellow maple leaves down across the lawn. He went into the house and came back with a gray flannel shirt and set it on the chair next to her. He did not drape it over her shoulders. He did not ask. She pulled it on 4 minutes later. They did not talk about Marcus. They did not talk about her father. He talked about the tractor. His grandfather had bought it the first year of his marriage and paid on it for 11 years. His father had learned to drive it at 9. He had learned to drive it at 7. Wyatt had managed the clutch last summer for the first time. Garrett had sat next to him with one hand still on the wheel. At 7, Wyatt came back, climbed up between them on the porch, leaned against his father's arm, and was asleep at 7:42. Garrett did not shift his arm to keep from waking him. Linnea looked at the boy a long time. It was not the look of a guest. It was the look of someone giving herself permission to see. She did not offer to stay the night. He did not invite her. At 9, she drove back to the Cedar Inn. Her key was already on the front desk. The innkeeper, Marge, slid it across without checking her name. Garrett called Tuesday, Marge said. Linnea took the key. In her room, she set the gray flannel shirt across the foot of the bed. She did not put it back in her overnight bag. She left it where it could be seen. She lay in bed and looked at the ceiling for a long time. The window was cracked open. Somewhere outside, a screen door opened and shut. A dog barked twice and stopped. She slept without dreams for the first time in 3 years. 3 months later, Pinnacle had finished a full forensic audit of Vance Foods. The board had passed a governance overhaul. Marcus's plea negotiations were underway. He would, 14 months later, accept 11 years federal. The 47 Hack member families had been paid back the diverted margin in full, plus interest, out of recovered Northwind assets. Linnea brought the new contract herself. 20-year extension with HAC. Minimum price floor index to USDA spot. Sustainability premium of 8%. Transparency clause eliminating any intermediary shell forever. A permanent supplier seat on the Vance Foods board. She flew to Cedar Falls on a Friday. The signing was at Bellwether Farm. 5 trustees of Hack sat at the long table that Garrett had pulled out into the front room. Hank stood behind Garrett's chair, the way a witness stands. After the last signature, Linnea closed her pen and set it down beside the document. Hank, for the first time since she'd met him, nodded at her the way a man nods at family. They ate a small lunch in the kitchen. Cold ham, bread, 2 pies someone's wife had sent over. The trustees thanked her and left in twos. Wyatt tugged at her sleeve at the door. "Want to ride? You did it bad last time. I'll show you how to hold on." Garrett did not stop him. She walked out across the gravel to the machine shed. She climbed the steel step up onto the John Deere and stood behind the seat. Wyatt sat on his father's lap. The boy's small hand went on the wheel. She set her own hand on the faded green fender, on the spot where the paint had worn down to bare metal from 47 years of 3 generations of hands. Garrett's hand was already there, on the outside of the wheel. His hand and hers were less than 2 inches apart on the metal. Wyatt did not see. Garrett did not move his hand. She did not move hers. The tractor pulled out of the shed at a walking pace. They made a slow, wide circle of the harvested bean field. It took 14 minutes. No one spoke. When they stopped, Wyatt climbed down first and thanked her with the same serious grown-man nod he had given her the first day. He held out his fist. She tapped it gently with hers. He ran off to find Hank. Garrett climbed down second. He pulled the canvas back over the tractor's hood, slow, the way he did every fall. He spoke without looking at her. "Stay the weekend if you can." "I can." He nodded once. He did not look at her then either, but he did not need to. She walked back to the porch by herself, the flannel shirt of his she had been wearing on the drive up still around her shoulders. She stood on the top step for a long moment, looking out at the field where the 3 of them had just made their circle. Behind her, in the open kitchen window, the radio was playing low, an old Hank Williams song. She had not turned it on. A year later, Vance Foods released its annual report. Revenue up 17%. Supplier compliance at 100%. 0 open scandals. The governance overhaul was cited as a case study in the Harvard Business Review. Linnea declined the cover story. She gave one written line for the piece. "Our suppliers do the work. I do the paperwork." She kept the Chicago apartment. She spent most of her time in Cedar Falls. Vance Foods opened a satellite office in Des Moines with 7 employees, officially described as a Midwest supplier liaison office. Unofficially, it was where Linnea worked the 4 days a week. She was not actually at the farm. Inside the farmhouse, the wardrobe on the east side of the upstairs bedroom held a drawer that was hers. In the kitchen, beside the framed photograph of Marin at the Alamaki County Fair in 2019, still in the same spot on the wall, never moved an inch, a new photograph had been added. Linnea, Garrett, and Wyatt at the same fair last August. Wyatt holding a stuffed catfish Garrett had won at the shooting booth. 2 photographs side by side, in matching frames Wyatt had helped Hank build out of scrap walnut from a fallen tree. Out at the road, the mailbox that had read G and W, Hollis in painted red letters, now stood next to a smaller mailbox underneath, written by hand in black marker, in the lopsided block letters of an 8-year-old who had since turned 9. L. Vance. Wyatt had written it. Garrett had not corrected the slightly oversized V. The postman knew. Garrett still wore Marin's wedding ring on a silver chain under his shirt. Linnea knew. She did not ask him to take it off. She did not wear a ring on her left hand. They were not married. They had no immediate plans to be. Neither of them was in a hurry to do what each of them had once gone without entirely. On a morning in October, low fog over the bean field, Garrett pulled the John Deere out of the shed to break up the soil for the winter cover crop, the way he had done every year for 15 years. Linnea stood on the porch in the same gray flannel shirt he had set on the chair beside her 2 autumns earlier, the one that now had a place in her drawer and held a cup of coffee made the way Hank had taught her. Hank drove past in his pickup, raised one finger off the steering wheel, did not need to say anything else. Before Garrett started the engine, he turned and looked toward the porch. He did not wave. He touched the brim of his cap, the same gesture from the parking lot in Des Moines 2 years before. The first time, the gesture had been polite distance. This time it was home. She smiled and lifted her coffee cup in answer. Wyatt came running out of the side door and climbed up behind his father. He turned back toward the porch and called, "Lynn, you coming?" She set the cup down on the top step and walked across the cold grass and climbed up. The tractor's engine caught, and the diesel smoke went thin in the fog. The 3 of them moved out across the field together. The oldest engine on the farm had been carrying all of them for 47 years before they met, and every year since toward a house that none of them had drawn, but all 3 of them had already lived in.